morning. Welcome to May. It has been such a beautiful month. We've had rain, we've had cold, and we've had some sunshine and some absolutely stunning days, and the garden is totally loving it. I know I took you guys for a tour not too long ago in April, but I thought I would take you on a new one. We might not wander through the whole thing, but there are some things I definitely want to show you. The first one being these hops behind me that are just doing so good. I don't know if you guys remember from last year, but I trellised them, which you can see this guy here starting this process up on this shop wall. And the reason I'm doing that is, number one, to protect the siding from all the heat and the sun that this shop gets, but also to grow something that's beautiful and make kind of an ugly side of a boring shop look a little bit prettier. In permaculture, you want to use what you have, and I have this amazing reflective heat surface, so I thought I would use it to grow these beautiful hops on. Along this side of the house here, I have rhubarb, which we have all over the garden, and I have a few roses and a bleeding heart. And they're pretty happy underneath there. Unfortunately, I've been holding out hope, hoping that this Don Juan rose, my absolute favorite rose, was gonna live, but so far nothing. And these guys are well on their way. So I have a feeling Mr. Don Juan did not like what the goats did to it last year. But these ones are thriving, and this bleeding heart, you can see down in here, it got hit by the cold. We had some really warm weather and then some really cold weather, and that is one of the hardships of gardening in a cold climate like ours. So it has rebounded though, and I think it's going to be fine. The kitchen garden is well underway for spring. It's such an exciting time to see all the new growth and all of the things bursting forth in the garden. Spring is definitely one of my most favorite times of year. These strawberries are bursting out and they are in full bloom, and some of them are already starting to form berries for this year. We have garlic that's just growing amazing. The violets and the pansies are some of my absolute favorite things in the garden. I just really can't get over how many amazing colors they are and how much you can do with them in the kitchen. I think they are probably one of my most favorite things. Honeyberry Hill has just gone absolutely crazy. We've had hummingbirds and pollinators all over the honeyberries pollinating them, and then the Yasta berries have also just done so well this year. I'm really excited. If you haven't heard yet, I am kind of picking up on hints that it might not be a great cherry year, but it potentially could be a good plum year this year. So keep your eye out. Sometimes I like to pay attention to the feelings and hear what people are saying and kind of get a drop on what's happening and what's coming and what kind of a season it might be, because sometimes things are bumper crops and sometimes you don't really get a whole lot, which is why you want to harvest as much as you can each year. And if you can harvest more than 1 year's worth, that's even better. honeyberries and yasta berries are some of our, for sure, definite crops that happen here on our homestead and in this food forest. And I'm really thankful we have so many of them, and they're doing really, really well. So I'm in my cellar garden right now, and there's not a whole lot of action going on in here. This year, this space is primarily going to be for warm loving crops, but I do have a couple of exceptions, onions being one. I know they're a little bit difficult to see right now because they're basically just little stalks. The onions in the ground. So there are about 150 onions right here in this space. And they're all the ones that I grew from seed. I maybe should have split them up into different garden beds to see which ones truly did produce very well. But I didn't do that, so they're going in there. And then we have our exciting little tunnel here, which is super fun. And these peas, which I planted about a month ago, are doing so good. They are a good couple of inches tall. So peas are one of those crops that you can actually plant super early. They don't really care if it snows. They don't really care if it's cold. As long as the ground is somewhat workable, you can throw the seeds in the ground and they'll germinate when they're ready. I don't space them at all. One of my favorite garden books, The Victory Garden, taught me don't space your peas, don't space your beans. And he said, if you're stingy with your peas and beans, they'll be stingy with you. And so far, I have had great luck not doing any spacing whatsoever, and they do wonderfully here in this kind of wood chip type row. I noticed that this gooseberry actually flowered this year, and we're gonna get a couple little gooseberries on there. So I have this plant right here, and then I have several others in the garden. I'll walk you out. I'm gonna show you something that I've been working on. Now, I took you along for a little bit of it, but I didn't show you the final look here. I do still have some work to do, but run out of steam, so I'm pretty excited about this garden space. This is the new garden space, well, the new old garden space. This was supposed to be the food forest, the original food forest, before I extended that throughout the rest of the 1.5 acre garden here. And kind of my new philosophy is that if I can use this black tarp in order to save me time and weeding and combat, I'll show you this stuff here, this creeping grass, which just takes over life itself. That's what I'm gonna do. So in here we have done a lot of broad forking and wood chipping, and I will also be building this garden out to be very similar to the cellar garden. So I have plans, it's all planned out on maps. We'll be planting it very soon, but not quite yet. I do have a couple of exciting things to show you. And this Williams Pride apple tree is one of them. I am so excited. This is one of the original trees I planted in this food forest here, and everything, mostly because of the voles, has just struggled and struggled and struggled. There are a few exceptions, and I'm going to show you those to you in probably in that vole video, because I really want to highlight how you can fight these little critters. I have a couple of exciting things that have happened this week. I have a couple of exciting things that are going to be happening in the coming weeks that I cannot wait to take you guys along. Here's another beautiful apple tree here. This is a Delogo crab apple. And it's kind of a wonky shape, but this guy just keeps on fighting and winning, and I'm pretty excited about that apple tree. So the plan in this big garden is to produce as much food as possible this year. There's so many things happening in this world, but I really don't believe in gardening out of fear. I believe in gardening because you can produce the best food in the world, the best tasting, the best looking, the most medicinal. And that's what we do here at Esther's Eden. So it's definitely a work in progress, sort of like all of us. We're a work in progress. So I'll show you this other bit here behind me. The chickens are working on this right here. I am hoping to have time this week to finish this project because I'd like to plant peas. And if you know anything about peas, they taste better in the cold weather. So if I don't get them in the ground, like this week, then I probably mostly lost my window to get the best tasting peas. Otherwise, it's best just to wait till fall, and then I'm really not in much of a hurry. But this section here is going to be home to some brassicas, which also prefer cold, and some beans, which prefer more of a mild temperature. And then back behind me is going to be a huge assortment. Man, that looks so good. I'm so happy. This about broke me, you guys. I bit off a big chunk. I knew it was going to be hard work. But once I'm looking at it now, I'm pretty excited about this plan. I did get a few other things done. I'm going to show you these things. And I'm trying something new I want to share with you. There is lots of things that we were waiting on because the temperatures were not warm enough to get a lot of crops in the ground. And then all of a sudden, like, North Idaho style, everything sort of decided temperatures are going to heat up, and now it is time. So basically, over the next week or so, I'm going to try to get in all of the cold crops, and then in a couple of weeks, I'm going to get in all of the hot crops. So pretty much we have decided to just go ahead and plant. So I'm going to take you in my greenhouse now. This is where some major action is happening, and I'm pretty excited about it. We have some perpetual onion. That's what I call it. It's not an official name. It's just onion that keeps self-sowing. It's kind of like a spring onion. So that's growing in here. And then we have the horseradish, and those two things just live in this bed all the time. They have grown and they're doing amazing. If you hear noise in the background, that's my sons. They're stacking firewood because it's also firewood season. So we have a whole bunch of plants in this greenhouse right now. We have some berry shrubs that still need to be planted. We have all of the starts that I've started that mostly need to be planted. And then we did go ahead and get all the peppers planted into the beds in this greenhouse, and then as well as the cucumbers. So let's talk about this fun stuff going on behind me. This is something I've never tried before and really is not recommended, but gardening here is just not the same as it is everywhere else. This season, our growing season here, is so short, and there are certain staple crops that we can totally count on. Greens, potatoes, of course, Idaho, don't judge. Those are some of the crops that we can count on here. Wheat and barley, those can be grown on a bigger field scale, but and we can also do a lot of root crops and things like that. But the thing is that squash, tomatoes, and corn are a favorite food for most people, and they really are just not that reliable in this climate, especially if you get into a cold pocket like I am here at Esther's Eden. So the question is, how do we find and make a crop that is a borderline crop for us, and how can we find ways that make it work? So I have a good friend. She does gardening here, and she's in a similar position that I'm in as far as temperature goes. And this is what she does with some of her crops. Now, you guys know I'm no stranger to starting plants in my house, no problem. But there are some crops that really just don't do that great. So what I thought I'd do is give it a try. And seeds are pretty cheap. So I went ahead and I ordered corn. I have tried corn here on this farm many times. Total fail. The only times I managed to get it past the silk stage and into making great ears of corn, and sometimes they've even gotten them filled out, then I open them up with great anticipation only to find a ton of earwigs in that. So there are some solutions for earwigs. We'll get there when we get there. I'll tell you about those. But for right now, we have done some soil blocking in these trays, and I'm pretty excited because they've all sprouted. So instead of just direct sowing these corn seeds out into that garden I just showed you, the big one, I put them in here, and my plan is to transplant them very soon, maybe within 2 weeks. And I tried to choose the time frame that I knew it would take to get them to germinate and then to put into the ground where they would not actually fill up these soil blocks, because the thing is that corn does not like root disturbance. So we're gonna see if this works. I have no idea. I have chosen 3 different varieties of corn to grow in the garden this year. We'll see which one wins. I have no idea. I am also going to try to plant some seeds in the ground right next to each of these. So I will have a direct test which one works, which one doesn't work. But kind of that direct seeding is going to be my backup in case this fails miserably. I don't know. Have you guys tried this before? Have you ever grown corn inside? My friend does it with success every year. She also does beans, and beans are like corn. They don't really like this. So we'll see. I'm pretty excited about this. We'll see. We'll see what ends up happening with this corn. I have also done the same thing, only I've done it in a little bit of a different way. I put some squash into peat pots. Now, I've done this for a couple of years in a row now, and that works really great because you can just leave the peat pots, they'll disintegrate into the soil, and the squash will root itself straight through those pots, and you plant the whole thing. And that works really, really well. And that's basically the only way I can get squash here on this farm, is if I start them in the house early, because our season is just so short. If this method succeeds and these varieties do really well, I will tell you what they are. If not, we'll keep searching. I have not forgotten about this kitchen garden area. It does still have quite a bit of work that needs to be done, like that. I do have a new plan though, which is kind of an unexpected plan that I'm going to go ahead and implement and do throughout this garden. But hello, Mr. Rooster. When you garden in a cold climate, or at least a climate sort of like mine, what happens is it's very, very cold, and we have snow, and then sometimes it warms up, and then you can maybe work the ground for a day or two, and then it gets cold again, and then you're stuck inside again, and you kind of play this dance throughout spring, and it's beautiful. I don't mind it one bit. But the thing is that what happens is eventually the grasses get ahead of you and the weeds get ahead of you, and you can only plant for so long. So right now we are in this window of we've got to get the crops in the ground. So wherever and whatever needs to be planted as far as vegetables, we've got to get them in. And you can succession sow a little bit with certain things, but the main bulk of the crop, we're about there. We're about at that planting time. Certainly for the cold things, not quite there for the warm livers, but we are getting there. And so projects like this garden here, which are really not on a time sensitive scale other than, the rest of summer and the hot afternoons and whatnot, this project has kind of taken a back seat while I work on the rest of it. Now, I also took you along doing some of this raspberry patch. Now, I didn't get very far. I'll show you. That's as far as I got. And the reason is because I kind of had to make a new plan. As you can tell, basically this patch has pretty much died out, and I wasn't sure why that happened, because I did so much work in this patch in order to get it to not have this problem. But sometimes this happens. This had a lot of issues in it. So what I'm actually gonna do is dig the whole thing out and start it over. And I think that's really going to help us to just kind of reset this area, get the grasses out and whatnot. And I'm contemplating right now whether or not I'm going to use some black fabric in this area as well, and just kind of tame this up just a little bit. So there is lots and lots and lots of exciting things happening in this garden. I'm so excited. This is the best it's looked in so many years. And you know, there are certainly still some big areas like this that have to be tackled. But when I look out beyond this and I look to these spaces that are really coming under production again and coming back under cultivation, it makes me very excited. And the whole point of this garden and the size of this garden for me was to produce an area that I never got bored in, that the fenced area would be a space that I could always play in and always do something in. I have definitely succeeded in that goal. And it might be a little bit crazy to some people, but this is the life I love living. Leave comments down below for me. Tell me about your garden. Tell me what you got going on or growing on. Are you just beginning your growing season like I am, or is yours well underway? I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week.